In this video, I want to talk about your camera's different modes. You've got your basic settings of manual. You can go through. You got program mode. Your camera thinks for you pretty much entirely. That's like using on auto. You've got shutter priority, where you control the shutter and the f-stop is controlled for you. And then aperture mode, where you control the aperture, but the shutter speed is controlled for you. Out of all the modes, if you're going to use a program style mode, I recommend aperture, and here is why. If you look at aperture mode, I adjust my aperture. I'm always want to be very mindful of my depth of field. That's going to create and determine how my images look. If I'm shooting wildlife, I want to use generally the smallest f-stop I possibly can, because I want to stop the action, get the fastest shutter speed I can. But sometimes I want to shoot a landscape, and I want to go up and I want to shoot at f16 or f18. I know on my digital camera shooting any better or any higher on an f-stop is going to reduce my quality. So I want to adjust my f-stop. The camera automatically adjusts the shutter speed. You press the plus minus button and you can adjust all throughout and make your image darker or lighter. This is your control of your shutter speed, and it will always set the shutter speed so that you get a setting. If you've got a minus setting, it'll always give you a -3 exposure. So you need to set a minus or a positive to whatever the exposure you want to get out of the camera. Aperture is a great way to go through that. Now, if you want to deal with manual, manual is a fantastic option. You just have to be on the ball. You are controlling your shutter speed. You are controlling your aperture freely. There's no extra buttons to press. But the downside is as your light changes, like if I put my hand in front of the lens here, it makes it much darker. Light changes as you go across your spectrum, so you want to be always moving, and that's what your camera would do for you automatically on aperture. So take a look at this. If we're on aperture priority mode here, it says at our setting as it is that we'd be at 1/25 of a second. As I make it darker, you can see it gets much slower, and that should speed up again. You've got one other setting that you might use from time to time. It all depends on your situation. But you might use shutter priority from time to time. Sometimes you know that if you need to stop the wings of a bird in flight, you need to get a certain shutter speed. The downside of this option is there we go, get on the shutter. The downside of this option is as you adjust the shutter, you can only go so far. It gets to the point where the f-stop, you can't control it anymore, and you want to get as high, fast as a shutter speed as you can, and your camera's going to say you really can't take that picture in this situation. So you're much more limited. You're only limited to the f-stops of your lens, whereas on aperture priority mode, you can set up and your camera freely can go through all the different shutter speeds, and you're not stuck. You can't get limited from one f-stop to another. You can go up, and as long as you've got a tripod, as long as you've got a steady enough hand, you can take the picture. So those are some basic elements that you need to remember. Which mode do you like? The mode I like the most, or I recommend the most, is aperture priority, because it allows you to think more about the picture you're going to take, compose it, get a good shot, and let the camera do the things that you know it's going to do. You know that your light's probably consistent for the most part, so you can meter, get a right exposure, and then let the camera do the rest of the work. So that's your camera's program modes of manual, aperture priority, shutter, and program mode.